Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I am Joey Francis, your life, love, and relationship coach. Thank you so much for joining me. I want to talk about emotional attachment because I truly believe that people underestimate how quietly it can happen. Most people imagine attachment starting with attraction. You meet someone, they're good looking, you like their energy, there is chemistry, and from there, your feelings start to grow. That's the version of attachment that I think most people understand, mainly because it's obvious. You know what is happening, you know you're interested, you know there's a part of you that wants something to develop. But you see, emotional attachment does not always begin that way. Sometimes it starts through familiarity. Someone is around, they listen, they check in, they become a person you talk to when something happens. Over time, they become associated with your comfort, safety, being understood. You may not be thinking about them romantically at all, but your nervous system starts recognizing them as someone who feels steady. See, and this is where things can get complicated. Because once someone becomes emotionally familiar, you may stop evaluating them the same way you would evaluate someone walking into your life for the first time. See, they already have access. They have that trust built up. They already have a place in your day, your thoughts, and maybe even your emotional routine. That does not automatically mean it's bad or something bad is happening. Friendship, support, and emotional closeness can be beautiful things. But it does mean you have to understand how attachment works, because emotional access is powerful. When someone has that kind of access to you, they need to respect it. If they don't, they can use it to cross lines you may have rejected immediately under a different circumstance. I see a version of this in the work that I do. As a dating and relationship coach, people come to me and talk about things they may not talk about with many people. They talk to me about heartbreak, confusion, insecurity, desire, shame, rejection, and patterns that they might be trying to understand. See, it's my job to listen and help them sort through what is happening. Give them a place where they can be honest without feeling judged. And I think that's the biggest thing about me, is that I'm not going to judge someone that comes and tells me these things. That kind of space can feel very powerful to someone who has not felt heard in a long time. Sometimes a person can confuse being understood with romantic connection. They're opening up, they feel safe, and suddenly the person helping them starts to look like something more than what they actually are. I have to be very clear about this when that happens, because it's my role not to become the person they attach to. My role is to help them understand themselves better. And that distinction matters. When someone is emotionally vulnerable with you, that is not an invitation to use the opening for your own benefit. A responsible person respects the boundary. An unhealthy person sees the same opening and starts looking for a way in. And that brings me to the story that inspired this podcast, the story I want to tell you. There was a woman who became very close with a man, and he was a work colleague. Over the course of about, let's say, 9 months, from what she told me. Now, from what I understand, the relationship was mostly friendship. He was around, he listened, he helped when she needed help. He became someone she could talk to, someone she trusted, someone who seemed steady in her life. And for those of you who work closely with other people, I'm sure that you can almost see the same thing happening. First it starts off with work and someone being there to help you out with work. And then you start socializing. And then they start to become part of your life. And they start getting to know deeper details about you. Then they start becoming the person who you confide in because you spend a lot of time with them, first of all, being at work. And second of all, because now you trust them. And see, in this story, the important part is that she was not looking at him romantically, at least in the beginning. He was not her usual type. She was not physically attracted to him. And on top of it all, he was married. She was not sitting there secretly hoping he would make a move. In her mind, he was just a friend, or at least someone who had become emotionally close through time, support, and familiarity. See, that detail matters because it changes the whole story. If a random married man had approached her and tried to start something, she probably would have shut it down quickly. I believe most people would. If you ask someone in a calm moment, would you start a relationship with someone who is already married? The answer is usually obvious. Most people, let's hope, most people would say no without even needing to think about it. That is the difference between answering a question in theory and living through it while emotions are involved. On paper, the answer is clean. In real life, after months of closeness, inside jokes, emotional support, late conversations, and the feeling that someone has become part of your life, the obvious answer can start to feel complicated. That is why emotional attachment is so dangerous when it forms around the wrong person. It can make a bad idea feel personal. It can make an unavailable person feel special. It can make a situation you would normally reject feel like an exception. And that is where this story started to shift. Because at some point, he began putting the moves on her, so to speak. But he didn't come in with clear affection, honesty, and respect. No. See, he started with something more manipulative. He started negging her. Now, if you're not familiar with that word, I get it. Negging is when someone gives you a backhanded compliment or makes subtle comments that lower another person's confidence. It is not always loud or obvious. Sometimes it sounds playful. Sometimes it hides behind sarcasm. The point is to make the person feel slightly off balance, as if they need to earn the approval of the person making the comment. And that is what makes it so unhealthy. Healthy attraction makes you feel seen. Negging makes you feel like you have to prove you are worth seeing. And in this case, it seemed to work because of the emotional connection that already existed. She was not originally trying to win him over. She had not been sitting there wanting him. But once someone close to her started giving her approval and then withholding it at the same time, something changed. This is the part people need to understand. He did not become attractive because he suddenly aligned with her standards. No. He became emotionally powerful because he already had a place in her life. And then he started making her question her place in his eyes. See, that is a completely different thing. A lot of people confuse that feeling with chemistry. They feel the tension, the uncertainty, the need to be chosen, and they interpret it as an attraction. But often what they're feeling is not desire in the healthy sense. It's the nervous system reacting to inconsistency, approval seeking, and the strange pull of wanting validation from someone who has started making them feel unsure. And to be honest with you, at least from what people have told me and what I have found out through reading and living life, that feeling can be intoxicating. It can also be deeply confusing because now the person is not simply asking, do I want him? She may be asking, why does he not fully want me? And that question gets under a person's skin, especially if the person is used to feeling confident, attracted, and desired. See, that's how manipulation can slip through a side door. It doesn't always begin with someone being swept off their feet. Sometimes it begins with someone being made to feel just insecure enough that they start chasing reassurance. Because let's not forget, he's married. And see, that should have been the end of the story. I say it because the reality was simple. He was not free. He was not fully available. He was still living inside another commitment, regardless of what he said about his marriage, his feelings, or his future plans. And see, this is where future faking comes in. Future faking, if you don't know, is when someone sells you a future in order to keep you emotionally invested in the present. They talk about what will happen one day. They describe the life you could have together. They make promises about leaving, changing, choosing you, building something real, or finally giving you the relationship you want once the timing is right. That kind of promise can be powerful because it gives pain a purpose. Instead of looking at the present and saying, this situation is wrong for me, the person starts thinking, this will all be worth it someday. And that's the trap. A promised future can become a hiding place from the present truth. In this story, he promised her the world. He gave her the idea that one day he would leave his wife and build a life with her. He made the situation feel temporary, as if the secrecy, the waiting, and the emotional discomfort were just parts of the road to something better. But a promise is not reality. At that moment, he was still married. That was the truth standing in front of her. Everything else was a story about what might happen later. And I want to be very clear here. Maybe some married people do leave. Maybe some are genuinely unhappy. Maybe someone can meet another person during a messy period of life and have real feelings. Life is so complicated. And I am not pretending every situation is perfectly clean. But none of that changes what is true right now. See, if someone is in a marriage today, they are married today. If someone says they're going to leave but has not left, the present reality is that they have not left. If someone wants to wait quietly in the background while they figure out their life, then the relationship they are offering you is not a full relationship. It is a promise with conditions attached. You have to accept the situation as it is, standing in front of you. That is one of the hardest parts of dating and relationships. People want to accept the potential because the potential feels better. They want to accept the promise because the promise gives hope. They want to accept the explanation because the explanation makes the behavior easier to tolerate. But acceptance is not about believing the best possible version of the future. Acceptance is about looking at what is real today and allowing it to count. That is where communication and acceptance come in again. And I know I've said it a million times, and I will keep saying it because it keeps being true. I will die on this hill, and I will fight anybody who says otherwise. Communication and acceptance are the two most important things in any relationship. Communication is how someone tells you where they are. Acceptance is whether you actually receive the truth of that information. A person can communicate a beautiful story about the future, but acceptance asks a more grounded question. What is happening now? Right now, are they available? Right now, are they choosing you openly? Are they free to build the kind of relationship you want? In this story, the answer was no. And that's why the blueprint matters. See, for this particular girl, the blueprint didn't exist for her in the situation. She didn't have that structure in place to pull her back to reality when emotions became involved. That's why it went longer than it should have. That is why he was the one who pulled away when his wife found out. That is why she's the one who ended up devastated, because by the time reality crashed into the fantasy, she was already emotionally attached. This is exactly why I talk about the blueprint so much. The blueprint is not there for the easy decisions. It is there for the moments when your emotions start defending a situation your clear mind would have rejected in 5 seconds. Before feelings are involved, most people know their standards. They know they would not want to be hidden. They know they would not want to date someone married. They know they would not want to build a future on secrecy, uncertainty, or promises that depend on someone else blowing up their life first. But then attachment gets involved, and suddenly everything becomes a negotiation. The blueprint is the thing that stops you from negotiating with reality. It reminds you of what matters when your emotions start making excuses. It forces you to look at behavior, availability, honesty, consistency, and alignment instead of being pulled into the story someone is telling you. And that is important because emotions are not always bad, but at the same time, they are not always accurate. Your feelings can be real and still be attached to a situation that is wrong for you. And that is a very important distinction. This woman's pain was real. Her attachment was real. The disappointment she felt when everything fell apart was real. I would never minimize that. But the relationship was built on something unstable. It was built on emotional familiarity, blurred boundaries, manipulation, secrecy, and a future that has a better chance of becoming a Netflix movie than reality. That is why it hurt so much when his wife found out and he pulled away. She was not only losing a person, she was losing the role he played in her life. She was losing the support system and the fantasy he sold her. She was losing the version of the future she had started imagining, and she was probably facing the painful reality that she had crossed lines she would never thought she would cross. That can be a lot for someone to process. This is why we have to talk about these situations with some compassion. It's easy to sit on the outside and say, well, she should have known better. Yeah, logically, sure. But people don't usually get pulled into these situations through logic. They get pulled in through emotion, vulnerability, timing, and unmet needs. That does not excuse the choice. It explains how the choice becomes easier to make. And there's a difference. Accountability matters. If you get involved with someone married, you are participating in something that is already built on dishonesty. That has to be said. But if we only shame people, that's not going to help them understand the emotional mechanics that got them there. And understanding the mechanics is what helps prevent it from happening again. So, let's talk about the mechanics. How does someone get into this situation? The first piece is emotional availability. She became emotionally available to him long before the relationship became romantic. He had been giving access through friendship and support. That access softened the line between this is my friend and this could be something more. Once that line was soft enough, he was able to step over it. The second piece is approval. See, through negging, he created a dynamic where his attention became something to earn. That is not love. That is not healthy attraction. That is someone using insecurity as a hook. And then the third piece is future faking. He gave her a reason to tolerate the present by selling her a better future. The present was messy, unavailable, and, let's be honest, morally complicated. The future sounded romantic, chosen, and one worth waiting for. Once she started investing in that future, walking away meant giving up that fantasy too. This is why these situations can become so sticky. People are not only attached to the person, they are attached to the story. And the story is often stronger than the reality. A married man promising to leave is not offering you a relationship. He's offering you a pending decision. Until that decision is made in the real world with real consequences, you are being asked to build your emotional life around something unfinished. That is a dangerous place to put your heart, because he may change his mind. His wife may find out, and suddenly the fantasy does not feel worth the cost anymore to him. Money, children, guilt, family pressure, legal issues, comfort, fear, and reputation can all become reasons he stays. He may have meant what he said in the moment and still fail to follow through later. Or, as much as people hate to hear this, he may have been lying the whole time. I mean, who lies, right? It would be so absurd. He may have said what he needed to say to get access to her body, attention, and emotional devotion. But in this situation, as far as I know, she told me she never slept with him. And I want to believe her. I get it. You don't want to think that's the case. You're the exception. But the truth is, you're probably not. And that is why you cannot build your life around promises. Do not date the promise, date the reality. The reality is what they are doing, not what they are describing. It is where they are today, not where they claim they will be someday. It is how they treat you when there are consequences, not how romantic they sound when no decision has to be made yet. This is exactly how the blueprint protects you. It brings you back to what is real. Someone can say, I'm going to leave. And the blueprint will say to you, wait a minute, have they left? Someone can say, oh my God, you are the one I really want. And the blueprint says, are they choosing you in a way that aligns with your standards? Someone can say, just give me a little bit of time. And the blueprint says, what are you being asked to live with while time passes? That's clarity. And without clarity, you can end up becoming loyal to someone else's uncertainty. And once that happens, you may find yourself waiting, hoping, excusing, and shrinking your own needs just to keep the attachment alive. That is not love. That is what I call emotional gambling. You are putting your future on the table and hoping another person eventually becomes who they promised they would become. And here's the thing, maybe they will. But maybe they won't. The question is why you would place your life in the hands of a maybe when the reality in front of you already violates what you say you want. That's the hard part, because again, if you asked most people in advance, they would know the answer. They would say they do not want to be someone's secret. They would say they do not want to be involved with someone who belongs to someone else. They would say they want honesty, availability, respect, and a relationship that can exist in the daylight. That is the clear mind talking. The attached mind talks differently. The attached mind says, but wait a second, you don't understand what we have. It says, this is different. He's really going to leave. It says, she does not understand him like I do. It says, I just need to be patient. That is how emotions start building a case against your own standards. And that is exactly when you need something stronger than the feeling. You need your blueprint. You need a clear understanding of what you will and will not participate in before someone you are attached to start asking you to bend. This is not just about married people, by the way. That is the story I'm using, but the principle is much bigger. People date promises all the time. They date someone who says they'll become more consistent. They date someone who says, oh, they'll be ready soon. They date someone who says they are over their ex, but still acts emotionally tied to them. They date someone who says they want commitment while every action suggests they only want comfort and convenience. See, the pattern is the same. The person gives you enough future to stop you from leaving the present. It might be intentional manipulation, or it might come from someone who genuinely likes the idea of a future, but has no real intention or maturity, or even the ability to build it. Either the way, the result for you is the same if you keep investing in something that doesn't exist yet. You're the one who loses time, clarity, trust in yourself. And when it collapses, you are left trying to understand something that felt so real was standing on so little. That is what emotional attachment can do. It can take a situation that would normally look obvious and make it feel meaningful because the person has already found a way into your emotional world. Someone who is unavailable starts to feel chosen. Someone who is unstable starts to feel important. Someone who should have remained outside of your romantic life starts to feel like the only person in the world who understands you. A person can feel safe in one context and dangerous in another. He may have felt safe as a friend. He may have been supportive. He may have listened well. None of that made him available. None of that made him honest. None of that erased the fact that he was married. You have to look at the whole person and the whole situation. Attachment tends to zoom in on the part that feels good. The blueprint zooms us back out. That is why it's practical. It gives you the ability to ask, what am I actually choosing here? Not what am I hoping for? Not what could happen one day? Not what story has this person told me? What am I participating in right now? And if the answer doesn't align with your standards, you have your answer. You may not like it. It may suck. You may still feel attached, but clarity is not always painless. Sometimes clarity is painful because it asks you to give up the fantasy that has been comforting you. That does not make clarity wrong. It just makes it necessary. In this story, the ending came when his wife found out. Once that happened, he pulled away. Suddenly, the promise was not enough to hold him in place. The future he talked about did not become a real choice. The consequences arrived, and he chose to stay. And she was left with the damage. That is often how these situations end. The person who was waiting is the one left grieving the fantasy. The married person may go back to their marriage, hide the damage, repair what they can, or move on in whatever way they choose. The person on the outside is left realizing they built emotional investment in a life that was never going to be available. That is why I want people to be careful. Not closed off, just careful. See, being careful means you understand your heart can attach to people who are not good for you. It means you take your own standards seriously when emotions enter the room. It means you accept reality before a promise turns into a cage. That is what this episode is really about. The emotional attachment trap. It is not only about wanting someone, it's about how someone becomes important enough that you stop seeing the situation clearly. Once that happens, promises can feel like proof. Attention can feel like love. Secrecy can feel romantic. Waiting can feel loyal. Pain can feel meaningful. But none of those feelings change the facts. If someone is unavailable, they're unavailable. If someone is married, they are married. If someone has not chosen you in reality, you have not been chosen. And if someone makes you smaller, more secretive, more anxious, or more willing to compromise your standards in order to keep them, then the connection is costing you something important. That is where you come back to yourself. You check in with your self-awareness. You look at the situation as if a friend were telling you. You stop treating a promise like a contract. You remember that love should not require you to live in a future that has not happened while ignoring the reality that is hurting you today. That is a hard lesson, but it is a necessary one. Because the right relationship does not need to be built out of secrecy and borrowed promises. It does not need someone to damage your confidence to make you chase approval. It does not require you to wait in the background of someone else's life and call that loyalty. A healthy relationship takes time, but it does not ask you to abandon reality. So if you are in a situation like this, or something close to it, I want you to be honest with yourself. Look at what's actually happening. Look at what you're being asked to accept. Look at whether the person's present behavior matches the future they are describing. And most of all, look at what this attachment is costing you. Because the pain of walking away from a fantasy is real, but the pain of living inside one for years is way worse. That is why I want you to build your blueprint before emotion takes over. Know what you will not participate in. Know what availability means to you. Know what honesty has to look like. Know what kind of relationship you are actually trying to build. Then when someone comes along with attention, comfort, chemistry, or a beautiful promise, you have something stronger than the feeling to guide you. Because feelings matter, but feelings should not be the only thing driving your life. If this episode hits you, and if you're trying to understand why you become attached to someone who is not good for you, or if you need help building your own blueprint so you can date with more clarity, you know where to find me. Go to joyfrancis.com. That's JOEYFRANCESS.com. And there you can send me a message, find my books, learn more about the work I do, or we can just talk if you need to. Thank you so much for being here with me and listening to me. You have no idea how grateful I am for each and every single one of you. And I hope that these messages help you and guide you in building your future. And before I leave, I just want you to remember this. Do not date the promise. Date the reality. Till next time.